Hello, everyone, and welcome back, Reset with Raven family. Today, I am joined by Laura Martin. Laura is a certified digestive health specialist who helps women with IBS and anxiety gain back control over their health so they can get back to living normally and symptom free. Through her signature method and strategy, she coaches women into healing IBS without being stuck with a laundry list of food sensitivities or trapped inside various diet cycles. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm excited to have you. I've had a series of gut health issues over the past years, and I know firsthand how an unhappy gut can really disrupt your entire day, life, and make you absolutely miserable. So, super excited to jump in and have this conversation with you. So, you have said that you hit rock bottom emotionally and physically, anxiety, depression, addiction, loss, all of that. Let's start by talking about how you reset from this as it relates to your health.
Yeah, so I reset by taking responsibility for my health for the longest time. Like from 13 is when I was first diagnosed with depression and anxiety, as well as IBS. I was then convinced that I was broken. So I perpetuated living a life that went about that path, right? Like I chose the wrong friend groups, I chose the wrong people to date, I chose the wrong environments, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until I finally hit a rock bottom after unexpectedly losing my mom and then finding myself in Asia to then dating someone that wasn't that well, like very toxic, very abusive, that I found myself sitting there going, okay, like I don't want to live this way anymore, but I don't know what else to do. Like I don't want to die. And that's where I was at that time. And after that, I just started to take radical acceptance, like I'm not at fault for what was happening to me. I'm not at fault for being sick. I'm not at fault for the unexpected losses or abuses or things like that, but I am responsible for how I was choosing to respond.
Oh, that's good. So you noticed, or you said you took responsibility for your life. So what exactly, I'm always curious to know like the how. So what steps did you take once you had this recognition or this epiphany, or I call it an aha moment?
Yeah. So my first step was surrounding myself with people that understood. For a long time, I thought I was alone in it. And I thought it was like my internal silent battle where like, you don't bring out your dirty laundry, you don't talk about poop at the table, you don't like do any of this stuff. So it was like this thing I was always internally fighting. So after that, I brought it to a table with a friend and she was like, at this time, like I also was struggling with an eating disorder since I was like 10. And at that time she was like, do you want to talk about like, you have a really you like food a lot, but like in a really unhealthy way. Do you want to go back and learn about it? Like if that's what you want to do. Because at this time I was living in Bangkok at the time, Thailand. And I was like teaching English. And I was like, I'm not an English teacher. Like it's not really my jam. I don't really know. And she's like, well, why don't you go back and study nutrition? And maybe that will help you on this course of your life. And so I went down and I started learning about nutrition and everything there was about it, but it just made my food anxiety worse. Like, even though it was good intention, I then went the opposite route and became orthorexic. So I was hyper focused on making my diet perfect, my fitness perfect. My life was this perfect little bubble because I was coming out of these extremes of life of like partying and abuse and toxic and what have you. So I was like deep in this and I was like, okay, so I surrounded myself in that environment. I started to go back to school to educate myself. And then at the same time, I was hiring experts. I had a GI specialist, I had a functional doctor, I had a naturopath, really surrounding myself in this environment so I could learn about it. And even then, it still wasn't working. Like it was one of those things where I was like, I don't get it. And so I went on and I proceeded to learn more about gut health and got certified in that route. And everything I was learning was all about eliminations and restrictions. And this is the way of healing IBS is you have to cut out all these foods and you have to do this kind of thing. And I was like, I struggle with an eating disorder. You can't tell me to cut out my foods and eliminate all this kind of stuff. Like I need a set path of what can I be eating? And I just didn't see that it existed. So after that, when I was sitting in my naturopath's office, like at my wit's end, just totally like sobbing, was like, those like deep belly sobs where you're like can't breathe. Like that's where I was at. Cause I was like, what is going on? Like I study this, I can help other people. Why can't I help myself? What is wrong with me right now? And so it was in that moment, she was like, do you want to talk about how your depression is linked to your IBS? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean I'm depressed? Because at that time I was like, depressed. That was my normal, right? Like that was my baseline. I didn't even at that time, because I stopped taking my medications early on. At that time, that was my base level. And two, what do you mean? Like, how is that connected? And that's what led me down this rabbit hole of gut-brain connection and creating this method I now teach called the free method, and what ultimately set me free from any diets or restrictions or eliminations, because I was able to harness this whole beautiful thing that we have together to really set myself free and welcome myself home. And I've gone on to help hundreds of women around the globe do the same now.
Awesome. Awesome. So I want to back up to, we hear the term anxiety a lot, but we don't hear food anxiety. So explain to us what food anxiety is.
Yeah. So can you sit down at a lunch and a friend isn't telling you what she's not eating? Oh, I can't have that because of gluten, or I can't have that because this is a diet I'm on, or I can't have this because X, Y, Z, like every single time. So food anxiety is when, specifically like orthorexia, that's the extreme of it. And that's where I was, where like, you can't look at a plate without thinking about what it's going to do to your body. And either, well, it has to do with calories, or it has to do with macronutrients or micronutrients, or making sure it's the perfect dish. Food stops becoming fun. And you can't stop thinking. And I always tell my clients, it's like the food hangover, because you can eat that food, right? Like you've said no, what have you, but then you're like enjoying your ice cream, but then you have that food hangover after, where you're like thinking about the food and you're anxious about the food. Is this going to cause a flare up? And you can't actually enjoy the meal. And this is where that anxiety starts to creep in, that you no longer look at food like it's fun or enjoyable or part of a community event or gathering. It now becomes this stressor of life.
Ooh, interesting. And I think I've had some of that because I've tried the low FODMAP, the elimination of this, elimination of gluten, elimination of dairy. So now, as you mentioned, now even eating now is a whole nother stress, or when you go out to eat, it's an awkward or an uncomfortable feeling because it's like, oh, I can't have that. Or if you're talking to the waiter or waitress, you have to, oh, does it have this in it? Does it have that? And you have to go down a laundry list of, oh, we'll take that out, take that. It just becomes now an ordeal. So I also wanted to know what made you, you talked about you were going to physicians and you hired a bunch of experts and really immersed yourself in learning about the gut. How did you know to approach it from like the gastroenterology or the stomach gut perspective when all of this was going on, when you were, at your wit's end? How did you know that was the particular aspect, or that was the specialty of medicine or physician that you needed to reach out to or connect with?
Yeah, because for over a year at that time, I was chasing different diets and different protocols, and I was on a cleanse all the time and doing all this stuff. And as I was going down this rabbit hole, as I'm studying, right, like this gut connection thing keeps popping up, and it's this microbiome. And I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. Like these microvilli, and they control this about you. Like, ooh, that's interesting. And like, it was just kind of a gut instinct, right? Like I'm learning about it, and I'm just like, okay, like this seems interesting. And mind you, like I'm eating quote unquote perfectly at this time, but I still could not poop. And so when you can't poop, what the culprit is the gut, right? Like you're not like, oh, I wonder what I can do for my skin. It's like, no, I'm going to go look at what's happening in my gut. And so I kept chasing this rabbit hole, being like, what the heck is going on? Like I'm eating these healthy foods. I'm eliminating so many things. At this time, I had like cut out 13 different food groups. My meals were like smoothies and soups. Like I wasn't doing anything. And I was like, why is this happening? And so I really dove into that because it was just one of those things that just kept screaming at me.
Nice, nice. And you alluded to the free method. So I want to know, like, what did you learn and discover? And tell us about the program or the method that you created. What is it? How does it work? And what is free stand for?
So, I love that. So free is obviously free. Like it's one of those things that gives you freedom. It makes you feel embodied, all this kind of stuff. But a huge issue that I realized when I was, like I said earlier, looking to heal my gut was everything was about the 4 R's, about like removing, replacing, reinoculating, reintroducing, like all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I did this so many times. Like I shouldn't have to keep eliminating foods every 30 days. That doesn't make sense. It should be able to add it back in, do it, whatever, and do it all that way. But what I realized is that one, this was just another mask for an eating disorder, cutting out these foods, this food anxiety. There had to be another way. There had to be a way that allowed me freedom to enjoy food, to go out to eat, to enjoy a pizza and a glass of wine without feeling like rubbish the whole time. And so the free method embodies that. And I really emphasize on the gut-brain connection and how at the root of IBS is BS, right? Like it's basically a doctor being like, I really don't know what's wrong with you, so we're just going to label you with this. When at the root of that is a gut-brain dysregulation. And so when you can nurture that, you can get on with eating foods normally because your body gets out of that fight or flight and into the rest and digest. And so the free method taps into that. So first we look at your foundations. And that comes from a self-intuitive practice. There is no, I do know that gut testing and microbiome testing and all that stuff will be the future of medicine, but right now it is way too new. So the best analysis is yourself. So we help you walk through that of, are you eating enough of the right foods at the right time in the right order? Walking you through that step. Also looking at what your foundations are from when you were young, right? Because your microbiome starts from when you are a fetus, right? Like the way that you are born is how you are introduced into, whether you are pushed through the birth canal and covered in this bacteria, or you got a C-section and you kind of bypass that. And now they're doing like swabs and stuff and helping to experiment with that because it's just become a thing. But it goes all the way back to that. So that's the foundations. And then R is reprogram, so that you can, because the cool thing about the body is that you can reprogram your digestive system. You can reprogram these trillions of bacteria that are on you. You can train them to be powerhouses again. Just because you got labeled with this BS, IBS label does not mean you're stuck with it forever. You can reprogram the body. And then we start to explore different options of food, which is the one E, and then evolve your lifestyle, which is the other E. So it's this whole multifaceted approach to getting you onto living your best life without food restrictions or eliminations and like worrying about where the nearest bathroom is, which I love.
Nice. So I'm just curious. Well, two things I'm thinking. I want to know more about what have you found about this gut-brain dysregulation. That's interesting to me. And then also the free method. What's the time frame for that? Is that months, years, and what type of discipline does this require as well?
Oh, I love those questions. So the programs that I run are either my one-on-one 8-week and my program that is 6-week, which is my self-paced program. And that's generally where you get the foundations. I've seen clients that they're feeling banging in 3 weeks, which is, I actually just got off the phone with 2 of my clients today and we were on their second meetings, and like, oh my goodness, the things that can happen when you start to add in the right foods at the right time, like the energy, the banging poops, like I call them unicorn poops because like nothing feels better. But everyone is different, right? Like I say, give it 3 weeks for a first win, which is what I usually try and do. And then from there to have like amplified health and all that kind of stuff, it takes time. Every single body is different. Every bacteria in your body is different. It's like your fingerprint. It takes time. But we try to give you a win within 3 weeks in some way, shape, or form. And that's generally what I see. But again, everybody is different. And then this gut-brain connection. Okay, so this is like my nerdy point. So excuse the excitement and if I talk really fast. So our gut and our brain, I mean, you've probably heard the gut called the second brain, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. So there are 2 reasons because of this. So one, it's because It runs entirely on its own through the system called the enteric nervous system. And so you don't have to tell your lungs to breathe, your heart to beat, your food to digest. It does it entirely on its own, which is so cool. And actually, majority of the communication goes from your gut to your brain through the gut-brain axis, which is wild to me. The second part is that 90% of your serotonin, 50% of your dopamine, GABA, norepinephrine, these things that control your mood and keep you calm are housed in this one cell layer around your gut. And so if your gut is healthy and inflamed, yes, it doesn't break the blood-brain barrier. You have to eat certain foods and minerals and to help it break to actually get to your brain. But if you're eating the right foods, you can calm this vagus nervous system that is going on right down the center of your body, basically. You can calm it down so that it communicates properly, and it helps to carry these neurotransmitters to your brain so that you can actually have rockin' energy and like happy hormones and all this kind of stuff. But if it is dysregulated, this is when you're going to see symptoms like anxiety or depression or constipation or diarrhea, which go hand in hand. Because if you have high neurotransmitters in your brain, that's anxiety. If you have high neurotransmitters in your gut, that's diarrhea and cramping. And those two things go hand in hand, right? Like when you have a big presentation and all of a sudden you're like, I gotta go to the bathroom all of a sudden. And you're like, oh, why do I have or like I get it a lot with my clients where they're like, I get anxious poops when I go to the grocery store. Like that's what I hear all the time. Or depression, right? So this is what I suffered from. IBS-C, because low neurotransmitters in the brain is depression. Low neurotransmitters in the gut is constipation. And these two things, right, they're always constantly working together. And so you can't just tackle one without the other. You have to come at it with a dual approach if you want to heal both. And if you're tackling IBS or digestive issues on its own and thinking eliminations and restrictions are going to heal it, it's just you're missing the key areas and arenas of what actually keeps your body in balance, which is this whole enteric nervous system and that's going on inside of you.
So how do you rebalance or reprogram that system? Because especially when I thought about like the IBS, I guess typically people have the IBS-C or the IBS-D, like the diarrhea or the constipation. So what do you do?
Yeah, good question. So shameless plug, head over to my Instagram. I have so much information there. Two, you can start with, like I said, getting your foundations. And this is where I have like the gut diary and you start not just track, like we love MyFitnessPal and we love whatever have you, but like we're not looking at the micronutrients and we're not paying attention to that stuff, but we're also not paying attention to when do your symptoms happen? What are your symptoms? What are your stress levels that day? Are you getting enough of the balance of fibers, like soluble and insoluble fiber? Are you getting enough fat, protein, carbs, what have you? So this is like what I have with my gut diary, right? And so you're tracking that stuff. So then you can take it and you can go to your GP, which is probably going to be like, oh, whatever, like here's some blood work. And then you go to your GI specialist and then you keep going from there where you're getting proper tests done and you'll come to an elimination of, okay, at least it's not a parasite or Crohn's or anything like that. It's just IBS. And that's when you start working from there. And you really start diving into, are you eating enough of the right foods at the right time in the right order? And I'm not talking about like stacking low FODMAPs. I'm talking about functional foods here, like liver and healthy fats and like organ meats and like fish and eggs and all these kind of things that your body needs, right? Like you need like different kind of minerals and vitamins that help balance the system. And so you start working from there at the same time, understanding how you can start to stimulate the nervous system or the vagus nerve, which that could be through cold showers, that could be through meditation, that could be through humming, that could be through stress management, like all these different kind of things that help to stimulate the communication from the gut to the brain and vice versa, so that you can actually start digesting the food. Because you can do as many diets as you want in your life, but if you are not getting yourself out of fight or flight and getting yourself into rest and digest, you're not taking in any of that food.
I like that. Rest and digest. That's the title of this episode now. That's good. That's good. I want to know, so what do you do to, if you're experiencing all of this, how do you develop that healthy relationship with food? Because even hearing you talk, it honestly, it sounds a bit overwhelming because I'm thinking about, going to a general practitioner, a gastroenterologist, potentially a naturopath, working with a coach. Like it seems, just hearing it, a bit overwhelming. So I'm thinking, okay, so what's a first foundational or simple step someone can take? And then how do you develop a healthy relationship with food, like in the meantime of going through this process? Because I could see this being just stressful and overwhelming.
Mm, what a good point to bring up, because I do get pulled out of it because this becomes such second nature in my life now. But going back to when it first started, it was finding someone I could trust that was living the life that I wanted to move forward with, right? Like when you're looking at gut health and stuff like that, at least for me, what was happening was I kept following people that were stuck on the elimination diets or low FODMAP diets, and that was their life. And I never saw them on like their social media or talking about it, like going out and like enjoying life, because that is at the core of what we're supposed to be doing, right? Like if you're not happy in the plan that you're doing, there is no way that is going to stick. And the whole point of healing your gut is creating a lifestyle around that, not adapting your lifestyle to that, right? And this is where you see people coming with their laundry list to the restaurants and being like, oh yeah, okay, like I can't have this, I can't have that, I can't do this. It's like, so water? Like, what do you want here?
Yeah,
And so,
that's what I'm thinking. And even when you hear the term diet, I kind of get a little trying to shy away from that word, because when I think of diet, I think of like temporary, I think of restrictive. So how do you, as you mentioned, create a lifestyle that's integrated with your health and happiness?
yeah, so I call it a nutrition routine instead of
Mm.
a diet, because we love routines here. We have our morning routines, we have our night routines, we have our work routines, we have all that kind of stuff, and we forget about our nutrition routine. Like, are you paying attention to the times that you're eating? Are you consistent with that? Do you even know what you're eating? Or are you going too fast in your life? And this is why I always bring it back to the foundations is do you even know? Like, or are we outsourcing it? Are we looking for the next diet? Are we looking for keto or low FODMAP or paleo or a laundry list of all that kind of stuff? But really, is that working for you? Right. And so we need to take and this goes back to the first question, right? We need to take responsibility for our health. And when we're outsourcing that, and we're not actually training ourselves what works, we're going to get stuck in the cycle, continuously getting trapped in these quote unquote diets, because we don't actually have a routine that is working for our lifestyle. So whether you're a busy mom or an entrepreneur or you're just chilling at home, like you got to have a routine when it comes to your nutrition plan. It can't just be like up in the air. It can't just be when you're struggling with IBS, right? Like general healthy, happy people, they're a different breed. But when it comes to IBS and gut health, there are certain things. And so the foundation always comes back to, what are you doing? What do you like doing? What is actually working for you? And how can you do more of that in your day-to-day?
That's good. And as you said, that brought it really full circle in terms of you being in the driver's seat of your health. I think my background, I was in healthcare, but I was in the administrative side, not clinical. But one of the things is we always talk about patient-centered health, and you know your body, you know your routines, you know things that you enjoy more than anyone else. So even as you're, partnering with your physicians and partnering with your healthcare team, you know you better than anyone, excuse me. So I think that's super important, to take that responsibility and to advocate for yourself for your health. So that's good. One of the last questions I wanted to ask you is, you have a quote, and I really want you to unpack this for me because I think it really just brings everything home. You said that you cannot be at war with your body or the world around you and win. Unpack that for me.
Yeah. So I always felt a victim in my life. And I see this with the majority of humans that we interact, right? Like, oh, this happened to me, woe is me, victim, what have you. And I played that fiddle very loud for all of my life. Like, oh, I have depression. This is it. Oh, woe is me. Oh, I unexpectedly lost my mom. Oh, addiction runs. Oh, all this kind of stuff. Right. And I was always at war. I was always trying to manipulate, fight, crawl, what have you. And it wasn't until I sat there and realized, oh, all of these things are working in my favor. Like every single thing is to show you a sign of the direction you're supposed to be going. But the longer you play that fiddle, the harder your battle is going to be. And it's going to be a battle as opposed to a dance. And the sooner you surrender, and this goes back to you are not at fault, but you are responsible. It goes back to that, because the sooner you take responsibility, the sooner you gain back all of your control. But if you're sitting there and you're fighting and you hate your body and you hate your health and you're trying to out supplement, or you're trying to restrict, or you're trying to out drink, or you're trying to do what have you, you're missing the point. You're missing that all of these things, this messenger that is running up to you and it has this really important letter to get to you, but you keep fighting him off and outrunning him or trying to silence him with like some type of medication. You're trying to do that. But when you finally allow him to come and he's like, I just had this really important message where like, stop eating broccoli, whatever it is, the message that he's trying to deliver to you, you finally sit there and you're like, oh, I feel freaking banging now. Like, that is awesome that I stopped being at war. But we can't be victims in this life. We have to be warriors. We have to be women, and we have to be like strong in our pursuit to this health and happiness.
That's so good. So good. So before I ask my final question, where can we find you online?
Come hang out over on Instagram. Honestly, that's just like my tried and true. I love being in my DMs and just like having quirky little voice notes with everyone. So come say hello. Let me know that you guys tuned in and watched this. But that's at Laura Martin _H2H. And yeah, from there, you'll see, you go into my bio and it has like step 1, step 2, step 3, like really telling you how to get through, where the first steps are, because I know. Like even now when I talk quick, I'm like, Laura, that is too much information. Slow it down. But there is step-by-step guides to make sure you're taking the right steps in the right order. And there's so many free resources and things to break it down so that you do pick one lane to move forward on. So there's not just like all this Dr. Google coming in and throwing information at you.
Awesome. And I visited her site and her IG. It's a wealth of information. So definitely check that out. And the final question is, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in your reset?
I think you hit it already, which was you can't be at war with your body. You can't be at war with the world. And we are responsible. As intimidating and as off-putting we like to really shy away from that, when you truly surrender into that, you gain your power back. You gain back so much more than just like eating. You gain back relationships that are on fire. You gain back community. You gain back work balance. You gain back all of that stuff when you start to be like, okay, I'm going to start living with intention and taking responsibility.
Awesome. Thank you. That was wonderful.
Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Another amazing conversation. Surrender and gain back your power. Thank you so much, Laura. Rest and Digest. That's got to be the name of this episode because this was so good. And the free method for amplified health, or as Laura called it, for feeling banging. As always, don't forget to share this message. See life as things are working for you. I'm Raven M. Harris on all social, and I'd love to connect with you and continue this conversation. And remember, a reset is always available to you.